On November 24, 1971, a man known as D.B. Cooper hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft and parachuted out of the plane with a ransom of $200,000, leaving behind a trail of mystery and intrigue that has captivated the public's imagination for decades. What's astonishing is that despite an extensive investigation by the FBI, which included a thorough analysis of the plane's flight path, passenger manifests, and eyewitness accounts, Cooper's true identity and fate remain a mystery to this day. The fact that he was able to escape without being caught has led to numerous theories and speculations about his identity and what happened to him after the jump, with some believing he may have been a seasoned parachutist or a military veteran, while others think he may have been a thrill-seeker who took unnecessary risks. The hijacking occurred on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, traveling from Portland, Oregon, to Seattle, Washington. The man had purchased his one-way ticket at the Portland airport under the name Dan Cooper, paying $18.52 in cash. The name D.B. Cooper was actually a media error that stuck after a reporter confused him with another person of interest. Cooper, described as a middle-aged man in his mid-40s with a calm demeanor, handed flight attendant Florence Schaffner a note claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. He then demanded $200,000 in cash for parachutes and a fuel truck standing by at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The airline met every demand. Cooper released all 36 passengers and 2 of the 3 flight attendants before ordering the crew to take off again, heading toward Mexico City with specific flight parameters he dictated himself. You're watching Mind Blown, where we uncover the stories that defy explanation, and the D.B. Cooper case is one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in American history. What makes this skyjacking unlike any other is the level of technical knowledge Cooper displayed during the entire operation. He instructed the flight crew to fly at an altitude no higher than 10,000 feet, maintain an airspeed of roughly 200 miles per hour, keep the wing flaps lowered to 15 degrees, and leave the landing gear deployed. These precise specifications suggested familiarity with the Boeing 727-100 aircraft, and specifically its unique rear air stair, a set of built-in stairs beneath the tail section that could be lowered during flight. No other commercial airliner in service at the time had this feature, and Cooper clearly knew it. At approximately 8:13 p.m. Pacific Time, somewhere over the rugged wilderness between Seattle and Reno, the crew noticed a sudden change in cabin pressure and a warning light indicating the aft air stair had been deployed. Cooper had jumped into the freezing November night. The conditions outside the aircraft were brutal. Temperatures of approximately -7 degrees Celsius, heavy rain, winds buffeting the fuselage, and total darkness below. He was wearing a lightweight business suit, a black JC, penny clip-on tie, loafers, and a thin raincoat. He carried no helmet and no survival gear. For a parachute jump into dense Pacific Northwest forest in those conditions, his clothing and equipment were dangerously inadequate. The FBI launched one of the largest and most expensive investigations in its history, codenamed NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. Agents initially estimated Cooper's landing zone to be a heavily forested stretch of terrain near Ariel, Washington, roughly 25 miles north of Portland. Ground search teams, military helicopters, and hundreds of law enforcement officers combed the area for weeks, turning up nothing. No parachute, no body, no money, no trace. The dense canopy of Douglas fir and western red cedar made aerial searches almost useless, and the rough terrain slowed ground teams to a crawl. Despite the massive effort, Cooper seemed to have disappeared completely. One critical detail that investigators focused on was the ransom money itself. The $200,000 was assembled from bills provided by Seattle First National Bank, and FBI agents had carefully recorded the serial numbers of all $10,020 bills before handing them over. The Bureau distributed lists of these serial numbers to banks, businesses, and financial institutions across the country, hoping that Cooper would eventually try to spend the cash. For years, not a single bill surfaced anywhere in circulation, which struck investigators as deeply unusual and led some to theorize that Cooper had never survived the jump. Then, on February 10, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was on a family outing at Tenna Bar, a sandy beach along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, about 20 miles southwest of Cooper's estimated flight path. While digging a fire pit, the boy uncovered 3 bundles of deteriorated $20 bills, totaling $5,800. FBI analysis confirmed the serial numbers matched the ransom money. The bills were heavily degraded, with rubber bands still intact around them, suggesting they had been buried in the sand for years rather than washed downstream recently. How the money ended up at Tenna Bar, miles from the suspected drop zone and on the opposite side of a mountain range, became a mystery within the mystery. To this day, no satisfactory explanation has been offered, and the Ingram find remains the only confirmed recovery of any of the ransom cash. Cooper's choice of parachutes also raised eyebrows among investigators. Of the 4 parachutes delivered to the plane, 2 were military-grade front reserve and backpack chutes, and 2 were civilian sport parachutes. One of the civilian reserves was a dummy chute, sewn shut and used only for ground training demonstrations. Cooper selected one functional military backpack parachute as his main canopy and, critically, took the dummy reserve. Some investigators argued this proved Cooper was not an experienced skydiver because a seasoned jumper would have recognized the dummy. Others countered that in the dim cabin lighting, the non-functional chute was difficult to distinguish from a working one, and that Cooper may have intended to use pieces of the reserve canopy as a makeshift bag for the ransom cash, which is exactly what he appeared to do. He cut the shroud lines from the dummy before jumping. The physical evidence left behind on the plane became the focus of decades of forensic work. FBI technicians recovered 66 latent fingerprints from Cooper's seat, the armrest, and the air stair mechanism. They also collected his black J.C. Penney clip-on tie, which he had removed before jumping. The tie yielded a DNA sample, and decades later, advanced testing identified trace particles embedded in the fabric, including pure titanium and rare earth elements. Researcher Tom Kay, working with a citizen science group called the Cooper Research Team, suggested in 2011 that these particles were consistent with someone who worked in the aerospace or chemical manufacturing industries during the late 1960s, potentially narrowing the profile of the hijacker to a specific sector of skilled workers in the Pacific Northwest region. Over the 45 years the case was officially active, the FBI investigated more than 1,000 suspects by name. Among the most prominent was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., a former Green Beret and helicopter pilot who carried out a nearly identical hijacking on a United Airlines 727 in April 1972, jumping over Provo, Utah, with $500,000 in ransom money. McCoy was captured 2 days later and sentenced to 45 years in prison. He escaped from Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in 1974 and was shot and killed by FBI agents during his recapture. Despite the striking similarities, the Bureau officially ruled McCoy out as Cooper, noting that eyewitnesses on Flight 305 did not match McCoy's physical description. Another prominent suspect was Robert Rackstraw, a decorated Vietnam War veteran with extensive parachute training and a history of fraud, forgery, and deception. Investigative journalist Tom Colbert spent years building a case against Rackstraw, including claims of coded letters sent to newspapers and circumstantial links to the hijacking. Rackstraw denied involvement until his death in 2019. The FBI never publicly confirmed Rackstraw as a viable suspect. Independent investigator Eric Eulis, who has studied the case for over a decade, pursued a different lead entirely, focusing on an engineer from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, area whom Eulis identified through analysis of the titanium particles on the tie clip and Boeing employment records from the era. Eulis presented his findings at multiple conferences and filed Freedom of Information Act requests to compel the FBI to release additional evidence. The case also generated a remarkable wave of copycats. In the 12 months following Cooper's hijacking, at least 14 individuals attempted to reenact the crime by hijacking Boeing 727 aircraft, demanding ransom money and parachutes. Some of them actually jumped. None got away with it. Martin McNally hijacked an American Airlines 727 in June 1972 and parachuted over Peru, Indiana, but lost the ransom bag during the jump and was arrested within days. Rob Dolan-Hetty hijacked a 727 in April 1972, demanding $200,000 and 2 parachutes, but surrendered before the plane took off. Frederick Hahnman hijacked an Eastern Airlines flight out of Philadelphia and demanded to be flown to Cuba after collecting a ransom. Every single copycat was either captured within days, shot, or surrendered. Cooper remained the sole exception. The airline industry responded to the Cooper hijacking and its imitators with sweeping security changes. In early 1973, the FAA mandated universal passenger screening at all U.S. airports, requiring every passenger to pass through metal detectors and have carry-on luggage inspected by X-ray machines. This was the first time such measures were required for domestic flights. Boeing also developed a mechanical device called the Cooper vane, a weighted aerodynamic wedge installed on the aft air stair of all 727 aircraft that made it physically impossible to lower the stairs during flight. The Cooper vane rendered the exact method of Cooper's escape permanently unusable on every 727 in service worldwide. On July 8, 2016, the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the DB Cooper case, redirecting resources to other priorities. The Bureau stated it was no longer actively pursuing leads, but would accept credible physical evidence, such as the parachute or the remaining ransom money, if any turned up. The announcement marked the end of a 45-year active investigation, the longest in Bureau history for a case of this type. The evidence, including Cooper's tie, the recovered bills, and the fingerprint cards, was preserved at FBI headquarters for potential future analysis. Despite the FBI's withdrawal, civilian investigators pressed on. In 2017, a team of researchers announced they had uncovered what they described as potential physical evidence in the heavily wooded terrain near the original search zone. The specifics of the find were not fully disclosed, but the announcement reignited public interest in the case and attracted renewed media coverage. Eric Ulis continued to conduct ground searches near the suspected drop zone, using updated flight path calculations and satellite imaging to narrow the area where Cooper most likely landed. His efforts reflected a broader trend. The Cooper case had migrated from an official law enforcement investigation into a decentralized, citizen-driven research effort powered by freedom of information requests, open-source data, and online collaboration. The cultural footprint of the hijacking has been enormous. The 1981 film, The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper, starred Treat Williams and Robert Duvall and dramatized a fictionalized version of events. Dozens of books have been written about the case, ranging from serious investigative journalism to speculative accounts. Cooper became a folk hero figure in the Pacific Northwest, with an annual celebration held in Ariel, Washington, where locals and enthusiasts gather at the Ariel store and tavern to toast the hijacker and trade theories. The event, held each November near the anniversary of the jump, draws visitors from across the country. What separates the Cooper case from other famous unsolved crimes is the total absence of a confirmed victim beyond the airline's insurance company, which paid the $200,000 ransom. No passenger or crew member was physically harmed. Cooper was polite throughout the hijacking, ordering a bourbon and soda, paying his drink tab, and even offering to request meals for the flight crew during the refueling stop in Seattle. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow, who was the last person to interact with Cooper before his jump, later described him as calm, deliberate, and not overtly threatening. Mucklow became a nun after the hijacking and declined most interview requests for decades. The question of whether Cooper survived the jump has divided experts since 1971. The FBI's official position, stated in multiple case summaries, leaned toward the conclusion that Cooper likely did not survive, citing the extreme weather, inadequate clothing, rough terrain, and the fact that no ransom money besides the Tennabar find ever circulated. However, the absence of a body, a parachute, or any other physical remains in the search area left the door open. The dense forest of the Pacific Northwest Cascade foothills could conceal wreckage for decades, and the FBI acknowledged that a body exposed to the elements in that environment could decompose beyond recognition within a few years. Subscribe to Mind Blown and hit the notification bell so you never miss a mystery. Drop your DB. Cooper theory in the comments. We read every single one.